First, I want to call up Javier, who is the Vice President of UCBA and owner of Delta 9 Dispensary. Thank you. Give him a round of applause. We have Mike Page, if he is still in the building. He might be outside. Oh, there he is. Mike Page, thank you, of Dosis, a vaping company, will be here talking, owner as well. And we have Art Abrahamian, who is the COO of WebJoint and also co-founder. Please give him a round of applause. Okay, great. So we're going to go ahead and just take a minute or two to quickly talk about your work, who you are, and what you're doing in the industry.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Javier Montes. I am a retail shop owner licensed in the city of Los Angeles and have been in this industry for 13 years. So anything that you guys have questions about what you're getting into, I'm a great resource because I've been through a lot. This hasn't been easy. It's been a roller coaster ride. I mean, to say that we can put a Netflix show that is going to move people is a bold statement and a real statement because it has been that crazy of an industry. Everybody here is fortunate enough to have groups like Social Equity LA and the United Cannabis Business Association, which I am also the vice president of, because we're out there fighting the fight for you guys to have a very solid foundation as your businesses start to grow and develop. So congratulations to everybody here for showing up and getting these resources because it's going to set you up to be a more successful and give you a better chance than 13 years ago what I faced, which was no data, no information, and at that point the DEA watching everybody and taking people out here in Los Angeles. So that's a little bit about myself. I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Javier. I'm Mike Page, Vice President of Quality and Compliance for Dosist. And I'm, unlike Javier and some of the others, like Ruben and others who spoke a little bit earlier, I am brand new to this industry. I spent 29 years in the food industry and medical devices in the areas of quality, regulatory, and product safety. So what I bring to the table is a wealth of experience in having worked in related businesses, especially food and medical device, that are FDA regulated and things of that nature. That's what I bring to Dosis, and hopefully that's what I bring to the industry as we move from where we are today to an even more regulated and accessible marketplace.
Hi everybody, my name's Art Abrahamian. I'm sorry, did you say 13 years? Damn, that is ancient in the cannabis industry. Props to you. And he's still alive, standing here today. Wow, good for you, man. I'm the co-founder and COO of a software company in the space called WebJoint. We've been in the industry for about 4.5 years now, which I thought was ancient, since like the gray market and whatnot. And since we've obviously transitioned to the legal market, 30% of the licensed delivery services in California use our software every day to manage their entire business. And we are kind of creating a new software now for brands in the cannabis industry. I could touch a little bit more on that later.
Actually, forgot one of our main speakers here. Ini? Yes, from Cannasafe here. I know he's going to do his own presentation afterwards, but we wanted him to please be here and provide some insight. So I apologize, and please give this. Yeah, please give him a round of applause, and you can please just quickly introduce yourself and your role, and then we'll get into the questions.
Thank you. I won't take any offense. Pleasure to be here. I am the scientific director for Cannasafe. Cannasafe is a testing lab, for those that don't know, the world's first accredited ISO 17025 cannabis accredited lab. And we just set up shop in Los Angeles in about almost 2 years now. We've been around for a while, but the new location is about 2 years old and currently, doing a lot for the marketplace. We'll get more into it once I do the presentation, but I've been in the industry for about 6 years now, testing cannabis. Began in Nevada as an analytical lab manager and found my way back out here. I actually grew up in LA, so it's good to be home, and I'm really excited to be part of this industry.
So I am I can hear better? Okay. So the question is, what do you think about the proposed ban on vapes? It's, yes.
So I'll answer that from a retailer's perspective, and then we'll go down the line. This is a very, I think, a good wealth of information and a great panel, by the way, as we're discussing a potential ban on vaping here in Los Angeles and across the state. I think that it would be a bigger problem if we banned vaping, not only here in Los Angeles, but across the state. Recently, legislative hearings happened, and the core of those hearings, and I think that a lot of the messaging at those hearings wasn't that a ban is good for our industry, but rather enforcement, because if you think about where all these products are being pulled from that are being tested, not only are they being pulled from licensed facilities, but also the underground market. The majority of these products that are failing are all from the underground market. The majority of these products that are making people sick are in that underground market. Therefore, if we were to ban at this moment all vaping products out of licensed retailers, where do you think all these products are going to end up, and how many more people are going to be getting sick? On my sales floor the other day, I was helping an older lady, and she said she didn't realize that there's a difference between legal and illegal products. And I thought, there is a lot of education that has to happen. Once I explained to her what the difference was, she was surprised of the difference. Another thing that we are discussing now is having labels or hologram packaging. I mean, all these things need to happen, but I don't see them happening with the flip of a switch or overnight or something that we just stop and then empower an underground market. So from a retailer's perspective, we message that if this were to leave my shop, it's only going to empower all the other shops that are taking from the industry that is licensed today, and actually, from a public safety side, making more people sick than if it was in a regulated market where we can quickly track and trace a product, pull it off the shelf, send it to testing, and see what made that person sick very quickly. Like they said earlier, if Chipotle had a spinach outbreak, you don't ban spinach, you recall. And so we're in a position with track and trace to be able to recall any product that makes somebody sick at the retail level, back through manufacturing, through distribution channels, send it to testing, and maybe even find the solution or that problem that's making somebody sick.
So I'll address this actually using a great example that many of you may remember. In 2008, there was an issue that was discovered in the pet food market. There were owners, cats and dogs dying, and what was discovered was that there was melamine, a material that's used in any number of substances. It's used actually to make indestructible dinnerware back in the 70s. And what was discovered after an investigation was that the raw material that was being sourced out of Greater China was being adulterated with this material. Well, we at that particular time, we didn't ban the sale of pet food as the solution to this finding. There was an investigation executed by USDA and FDA. They identified the issue. They enacted a corrective action, and they all the while continued to sell pet food. The solution to an issue that is acute, meaning it happens at a particular point in time and not over a longer period of time, and this is an acute issue. Vaping and e-cigarettes has been legal for more than 7 years. Vaping in the cannabis industry has been legal for more than 2 years. And all of a sudden, we have an issue that is causing, though traumatic to those individuals who are suffering through that and who have lost loved ones, it is an acute issue. And the solution is not to ban all of vaping, but rather to find out what the issue is, what are the adulterants, address that, while continuing to allow individuals of legal age to purchase the product from legal licensed manufacturers and wholesalers as well as retailers so that they can continue to use the products that they have chosen to use, understanding the potential consequences of those things. So we have to, as an industry, educate our legislators and the consuming public on what the potential issues are and how best to manage this, rather than taking an opportunity to gain a spotlight and banning the product because you believe that's going to get you votes in the next election.
Yeah, just to add to that, just looking at our own retail data, one side of it is the legal side, the other side of it is how are consumers reacting, right? And just looking at our retail data, which actually I did for Aaron, Cannasafe, and basically the first death that was recorded was, I believe, August 23rd or 28th. It was the end of August. Sales were normal up until September 1st. The news started spreading. From September 1st to now, there's been a 22% decrease in vape sales, and that's just consumers making those decisions. And it's getting worse. We looked at just this week compared to last, and it was a 58% decrease just week after week. As more and more deaths are coming out, consumers are making that conscious decision on their own. So that's one part of the equation. As far as like the legal action that these lawmakers are proposing, I do think it's, I think we all have a consent here that it is outrageous, right? It is overreaching, and it is pointing a finger at a legal industry that's trying their best to go through the compliant testing for all the products that hit the market that have COAs, for manufacturers that are making their product the right way, for retailers that are selling legal, licensed, tested product, and pointing the fingers at those guys, I don't think is the solution to the problem, right? I think we need to look into who's selling product that isn't going through rigorous testing, that isn't being made by well-funded manufacturers that have tons of steps in their process to make good quality product, and isn't being sold by retailers that are selling licensed product. And it's just crazy to me that the lawmakers, that's the first thing that they do, right? And I don't know if this isn't the first time. I don't know if you all heard of a few cities were really upset that deliveries were allowed anywhere in California. They didn't want to allow deliveries in California. Well, guess what? It's, if you don't allow delivery services to deliver into your city, that doesn't stop deliveries from happening in your city. That just stops the licensed legal deliveries from happening in your city, which just makes the problem worse, right? And so I'm just seeing a repeat of this pattern of these lawmakers just want to keep pointing their fingers at the people that are working their hardest to do things the right way, do things the compliant way, jump through all the legal loopholes that they put together, and it's still not good enough. And I don't know. So we just need to shake a politician or something and open their eyes. I don't know. That's kind of where, not my specialty, but.
This is very true. I agree with what everyone is saying. By the way, I was just looking up the official name the CDC came up with is E-Valley, right? It is e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. So that's really the official name. Vape get sounds better. Honestly, what everybody's saying is true, but we cannot forget that I believe the proposition that passed that allow us to be in the industry that we're in now only passed by 50-something%. So there's a whole mass of people out there that are against this industry, and it's just a matter of letting something like this ruin it so that people can jump in and be like, see, we told you, the federal government should have never allowed this, or they weren't ready for this. So, that's why Cannasafe kind of took it upon ourselves as soon as this news of this broke to begin our own investigation just for consumer education. As the CDC is scrambling to find out what's going on, we as well are doing the same thing. What is it in these illegal vapes that are making people sick? And I'll go into that later in my presentation a little bit to touch on it. But it's up to us to really regulate our industry, show that we know what we're doing. It's not just about shopping legal. Even shopping legal, do we know what we are producing, right? So even especially the legal folks have to be able to get together and do more research, have to be able to collaborate, not just amongst labs, but business owners. More than just getting an industry and making money. This is medicine, and we should treat it as medicine. So what are we going to do to be able to show the general public that we really care about these things? I'll get a little more into it later on, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. So just to kind of piggyback on that, I was going to say, I think we've already proved over and over that prohibition doesn't work. So we can't keep repeating the same mistake, expecting it to have different results. It's not going to. So that's my take on the ban. The second question is, why is it important to make sure all products go through a testing facility before reaching the retail market and the public?
I think it's a very important step because at that testing facility, you're able to flag any products that are not compliant or any products that may harm the consumer. And so at that point, that product doesn't leave or go into a retail chain or come to my store. And then I have a sick patient or a sick customer now coming back saying this product makes me sick. So I think it's a very important part. I think all products are and should be tested. And I think that's a great start for that part.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And in the industry that I've spent most of my life being a part of, that is part and parcel of what you have to have. One, because you're consuming whether it be a food or actually the medical devices being implanted in your body, you want to understand what those materials are comprised of and whether or not there are any toxicities that are associated with them. But the point that I would add to what Javier just mentioned, reputable companies make mistakes. And our testing, and Cannasafe is our partner to help us at Dosis understand what we are delivering to our consumers. The consumers are our most important entity, and we want to make sure that we are delivering to you a product that we have no problem standing behind, that it's credible, and we have the evidence that is produced by Cannasafe that says that. But on occasion, things happen in your supply chain that are unknown to you. Something that may be akin to a contamination that you are not aware of, and you manufacture the product with that contaminated product. Then your partner, your safety partner, Cannasafe in our case, helps us understand, hey, something along the way has happened and this product is not fit for consumption, and therefore we have the information we need to ensure that we don't send to you something that may harm you. So it's all that the entire network, from the partners that we have to help us understand those things, as well as our suppliers for the raw ingredients, are all important in this process.
Yeah, so the answer to that question to me is also twofold. So it's one, you want to know, what you're smoking or ingesting, right? You want to make sure that it's clean, it's safe, no pesticides, etc. I mean, how many of you have seen like a testing lab COA, like a Cannasafe COA? Okay, cool. Yeah, so you look at it and there's literally like 200 things on the list, and you're like, damn, I am so glad somebody's testing that these 200 things. I can't even pronounce half of them. I'm glad they're not inside of me, right? So I'll let the expert touch on that subject. But the other key thing is dosing. So Dosis, an expert in dosing. Consumers want to know what they're inputting into their body and how much of it they're inputting into your body, and that's becoming more and more important as we're trying to make cannabis safer and more accessible to wider groups of people. I mean, if you imagine every time you drink a beer, you feel like drastically different, right? That would not be good. People that drink alcohol or drink beer, they know, okay, 1, 2, I feel good. 3, 4, things are getting kind of funky, and so on and so forth, right? And so you know your limits. And even like for beginners, the difference between 5 milligrams of THC and 10 milligrams of THC is night and day, right? So key part also is dosing.
Yeah, very good points. If I may add to that, really great point. You want to be able to test. So the regulatory bodies have set aside tests for these contaminants, pesticides, heavy metals, microbials, and whatnot, at levels that are actually better than your food, right? These are really, really low part per billion levels that the strawberries you eat has more pesticides than your cannabis. And, great for the state being able to do that. At Cannasafe, we're looking to really expand on that. Okay, what else could be a public health concern that we're not potentially looking at? It unfortunately, vape gate or whatever allowed for some things to come to light. Maybe there's some things that labs should be looking at or regulators should be looking at more to not necessarily over-regulate, because you may say there's too much regulation, but in public safety concern, just there are certain things that can be done to make sure that this medicine you're consuming doesn't cause more harm. One thing we have to keep in mind is there's only so much you can do, just like the panelists said here. Cannabis contains a whole slew of chemical components that react to our bodies differently based on our receptors, right? Comparison with beer, like one beer might get somebody completely wasted as opposed to others that have 10. Similar thing with cannabis, you might get a 10 milligram and be laid out for a few days, and somebody else, that's what makes their day. So it's really important that we not only test what is prescribed by the state, but start to think outside the box. What else may we need to look into so that people are not looking at industry saying, well, you guys are screwing up. We can learn from the mistakes of, I don't know, industries that have come before us, nutraceuticals or food. What mistakes have they made, and we can accelerate on that progress.
So the next question for the panelists is, what is the testing and compliance process, the steps that a product goes through when they reach the lab and consumer? So anybody who wants to answer that.
What is a testing process, correct? So essentially, real quick, an overview. The lab for compliance testing would come to your site per BCC, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, per the regulations, sample a representative portion of your batch based on your batch size and seal that security-wise, secure in a vehicle and transport it in a controlled manner to the lab. And at that point, the lab would log everything into an information management system and homogenize everything that they get. So maybe you kind of think about it, when people do R&D and they want, look at their THC, they might give you the nicest looking bud. Oh yeah, take this and test THC, it's 25%. But in compliance, none of that matters because we're sampling randomly and at a higher, greater quantity, and then homogenizing that, basically grinding that all down and passing it through the different tests. First of all, it's microbials. We're looking at contaminants, salmonella and E. coli, things you hear about all the time in the news. That has to be done in a very clean manner. Pass through to the rest of the assays. Heavy metals, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, lead, pesticides, there are 66 of them. I'm not going to list them all out right now. And mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are pretty much toxins produced by fungi. It goes through that as well. Residual solvents, if it's an oil product that's being made, what solvent did you use, and we want to make sure to the safe limit. So all this tests get split separately. It goes through this whole array of testing, and that's compiled on a certificate of analysis. So, I always encourage consumers, even business owners, as you're kind of looking at a certificate of analysis, look at more than the front page. The front page might have your potency, your terpenes. That looks great. Now flip to the next few pages. Generally, it's like 3-4 pages. List your pesticides, your solvents. What are those levels? Right? There are certain thresholds for passing, but because something passed doesn't mean it wasn't up there. The threshold, threshold is 10. Your limit, it hit for 9. You make a decision. Do you even want to bother with the 9 or not? That's up to you as a consumer to make the decision. So you got to look at all the information and put it together. And that's what we at the lab are here for, to help educate folks on how do you even read a COA? Why is it important to ask for a COA? When you go to the store to buy your fruit, all this testing happens under the scene. You don't ask for, let me see the pesticide limit on this strawberry that I bought, right? It kind of happens behind the scenes, but this is medicine, right? And it's regulated, should be regulated as such. So you should ask for these things until our industry matures to a point that testing is really commonplace across the nation and is standardized. Then maybe it stops being something you ask for each time you buy your product.
Add one thing. I like I said, I spent a lot of time in my career in the food industry, and a portion of it was with Kraft that owns Nabisco, and I can imagine that many of you in here have probably eaten an Oreo. There's a lot to be learned from the cannabis industry that the food industry could take note of, and one, it's transparency. If you buy any product that's legally sold through a retailer like Javier's and others, and products like Dosis, that QR code tells you exactly what was found in the product that you're purchasing. You can't find out what testing results there are for that Oreo or that strawberry that Ini just referenced.
Yeah, and as a retailer, I'll add to that. I have seen the QR codes on packages, and they're full of information when you scan them. And that is a very detailed, in-depth representation that the manufacturers are standing behind the product. These are the safest products that you can go out and purchase in a licensed environment. Doubling back to why we should never discuss this from a ban perspective and a knee-jerk reaction to just go and ban something, but rather let's continue to test product. Let's continue to learn more about the product, and let's continue to educate.
Last question, and this is for everybody. What is the biggest challenge facing the cannabis industry in terms of safety and compliance, in your opinion?
Challenge is when, from a retailer perspective, when these types of crises or vape gates happen, but it's also a positive to see how fast we all come together and pull together to find out what exactly is happening, how we could all participate and get all these products tested and looked into. But seeing all that happen very quickly and very fast as an industry is very impressive, because like I said, over 13 years, I've seen this advance. I've seen this industry become stronger and full of more information than 13 years ago. So for me, that I think is a positive.
I think the two biggest issues, one, and these are both very important, but one is access. There are 482 cities in the state of California. I'm a new resident of California living here in LA, and only 25% of those 482 cities in this state, where cannabis is legal, have access to a licensed retailer. I just moved here from Atlanta, Georgia, where there are 3.5 to 4.5 million people in that city. There are more than 10 million citizens in LA. So you have an overwhelming, it is the largest or most populous state in the US, and cannabis is legal, but you can't access it everywhere, which means you're giving the illicit market free reign over the individuals where there is a demand. So legal access helps prevent that, and I won't get into the taxation issues because that was well discussed earlier. Two, education. Our legislators are not as knowledgeable about this business, how it should be run, the legislation that we need to ensure better regulation, more effective regulation, and things of that nature. So as an industry, we have to come together to help them to become more knowledgeable so that when they do write a law, it aids the work that we do rather than hinders the work that we do.
Yeah, I'll agree with both of those points. Educating the consumer, one, right? You want to make sure that they know that they should be buying licensed, tested product. And then two, giving them access to that licensed, tested product. The problem becomes, the waters get kind of murky when a consumer might go to an unlicensed business and see rip-off Dosis carts or rip-off Heavy Hitters, Kingpen, like all these brands that are basically being duplicated by the black market, right? So they're making it even more complicated to let the consumers know, what's right, what's tested, and what's not, right? And so at WebJoint, we're doing a few things to try to at least solve the access problem. We work with 30% of the licensed delivery market in California, and we're basically using them as fulfillment partners now throughout the state. And again, these are licensed businesses that are selling tested product, that are doing things the right way. And so now we're working with a ton of brands to basically set up an e-commerce website onto their brand's main domain name. So our opinion is you should be able to go to, say, Dosist.com, click on Shop Now, see see all the product offering that Dosis has, and buy directly from the website and get it delivered directly by a licensed retailer. That way you know that the source is true, you're on Dosis' main website, you're placing that order, and the person who's fulfilling that order is also licensed and true. And that way you could bypass all the muddy waters and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how we're solving the access issue. And Cannasafe, is doing really well on the consumer education front. So I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. That was my point as well. Education is a big thing, and they've all touched on that. And we are trying to spearhead education. Otherwise, it's standardization and collaboration. Again, I say it, we all need to collaborate in this industry. There's, a lot of things about IP and protecting your IP, and that may be, but if we want to move this boat forward, we have to, kind of be able to work together and play together to be able to make sure that not even the assays that we do, the instruments, the methods that we put out, food industry has, or environmental industry has, ASTM method, and standardized methodologies with standardized instrumentation to run certain assays. If we get together and are able to do that, it'll make it a little more clean. Even things like we discussed metric earlier, the QR codes on the packaging. Being able to put a COA and the QR code is sort of universal, so that Dosis could put a QR code that they don't have to create a website and have uploaded COAs. All of these are uploaded into metric. You should be able to just scan and directly, boom, it pops up, kind of open, right? As opposed to, I'm going to hide the COA until a customer asks for it, and some businesses can't even find it. So just education, as part of education and as part of standardization, I think those are some of the, what's keeping us from progressing.
As I mentioned before, I think it is the responsibility of LA to keep this community thriving. The industry needs your help, not only in education, but we need to stop supporting the illicit market. We can be part of the enforcement. We can be part of the solution. We just need to understand that as we know more, we need to educate those around us so that eventually it will be very, very hard for an illicit shop or an illicit market to keep taking the profits from the thriving market or the licensed market. I was just going to say, it's a quick story that I heard from Javier that I thought it was kind of a shame to have here in LA. He actually has to compete against unlicensed owners who can just put up a container down the street from his licensed shop and sell products from there. There's no overhead, there's no expense, there's lots of profit, and the fact that we still have that opportunity for those in the unlicensed market to happen here, it just seems to me that we need to educate ourselves. We need to make sure that we understand if we want to see solutions, we need to start with ourselves. So, any questions from anybody before we let the panelists go? No questions? Yes.
I'm just curious, what about your supply chain if you do supplier qualification? Because I heard mostly with the vape it's more cadmium, cheap solvent.
Yeah, it's actually, we have a quality and regulatory team at Dosis that I lead. And for any new suppliers, as we are expanding in our markets, we just opened up Nevada, and Canada is yet to follow. But at each of our locations, we identify a manufacturer or a partner in that region, and we employ the traditional supply chain evaluations that I've spent 29 years doing over in my career. To vet each of our suppliers, their suppliers for the raw materials, as well as the manufacturing space as well. Yeah. And we are very fortunate in that our co-founder is still with our company and very much involved, and he is the developer of our pen, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I just want to say regarding the cadmium and the soldering, it's a theory. that the soldering, the silver soldering in the battery, and oil leaking. And pretty much what happens is the oil has to leak from the cartridge down to the battery compartment where that soldering is and sort of cause a short and starts heating up. And then while you're vaping, you vape that up as well. And it's interesting because we're testing that as well. I actually saw this happen firsthand, and the illicit card that Cannasafe bought and has been doing studies on. As you heat them up, for whatever reason, it's cheap manufacturing, they leak. And they leak into the battery compartment and start smelling like, really crazy fumes. So you imagine that happening and you just inhaling that. And so it's a possible contaminant or a possible reason why the cases may be, but I'm not sure if that is the major case, major culprit.
Alex?
I have a question. As far as the testing, would it be, do you see it, price testing increasing or decreasing as the industry grows? Because right now, the standard price would be whatever it is, and then you see that price increasing or decreasing, say for a customer, say if I got some product and I wanted to retest it without having the distributor test it, and that would be consumer responsibility, but do you see that price being accessible to consumers, or would that be a standard price throughout the future? Do you see?
Well, so any lab, that's set up knows that there is a certain, you set up your profit margin, right? There's certain cost to what it takes to go through all this required testing. And I can tell you that it's not cheap, right? So now, it'll probably decrease just because of competition in the marketplace. I think there's about 50 labs now, and there's plenty more coming online. So as people are coming online, they'll start offering, cheaper pricing. But of course, I always say you get what you pay for. I've been in situations both from Nevada and here where we'll have competitors come in and underprice us, and clients will jump because I understand the cost perspective of going to, that cheaper client, but you get what you pay for. Service lags, test results are inconsistent. You can't reach anybody. It takes 2 weeks to get results back out. So I believe it'll slowly go down, but for that to happen, the lab's cost has to go down as well. So the standards that we're buying, the instruments that we're buying, generally each instrument, for instance, our pesticide instrument, it's about $300,000 for one, right? So you imagine Cannasafe has 8 of those. So you can imagine the cost of that, and upkeeping and making sure we give you accurate test results. So it really depends. I think it'll slightly go down, but to a point, depends what you consider affordable. Hopefully, as legislation changes and what they've been talking about here, and governments come to realize what's up with their taxing and lower that rate, so it can make you more profitable and everybody more profitable while providing, the good, great service that we do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Social Equity LA.